Good afternoon and welcome to the New Orleans Ernest N Morial Convention Center. I'm excited to be here today to officially announce a partnership between the National Governors Association and ResCon, which is an international disaster response and preparedness conference that's been hosted here in New Orleans for each of the last 8 years. And obviously, to me, New Orleans is the perfect place to host such a conference. Well, to me, New Orleans is the perfect place to host any conference. But our state has been both the site of major losses because of natural disasters, but also the home of some really transformational rebuilding, recovery, and resiliency efforts. And I like to brag that we're some of the most practiced and prepared state officials in the country when it comes to disaster management. But each and every day, we have to work hard to make sure our communities are prepared to weather and respond to and recover from the next disaster. Or better said, we have to work each and every day to become more resilient. In Louisiana, we're focusing on regional drainage and water control projects to make sure that we're maximizing resources and planning in a way that benefit all of our communities. We're focused on mitigation alongside protection. And we are currently engaged in relocating a community that has been historically affected by flooding. It's the first major relocation of its kind in our country. It's the Ile de Jean Charles down in southern Lafourche Parish. But ResCon obviously is not just about what we're doing in Louisiana. It's about bringing experts together from all over the country and really around the world to share best practices, discuss the future, make connections, and plan for ways that all of our communities can be more resilient in the future. And I can tell you that as governor, resiliency is something that I think about each and every day. We face big challenges from the ever-changing weather patterns with increasing frequency and intensity of major storms. And by the way, not just named storms anymore. In 2016, we had 56 of 64 parishes declared a major federal disaster, and neither of those storms were named. They weren't hurricanes. These were just really nasty storms that settled over Louisiana. And I know that I'm not alone and that Louisiana is not alone. And that's why we're excited that ResCon is partnering with the National Governors Association to make this an official event of the National Governors Association. The NGA is not only a major resource for governors and their teams, it's been a great partner to us here in Louisiana. Earlier this year, with the National Governors Association, we brought the State Cybersecurity Summit to North Louisiana, where we had 400 people, including officials from every state in Shreveport-Bossier, to discuss the growing threat to our states with experts in the field. And I'm excited today to be joined by Nikki Guilford from the National Governors Association and Mike Sawawa of the New Orleans Ernest N Morial Convention Center, who will now make a few comments. Thank you, Nikki.
Thank you, Governor. Thanks for having us. Thanks for welcoming NGA. Louisiana is always very welcoming to us, and it's our pleasure to be here. I'm really here on behalf of all of my team at NGA and also the nation's governors, and I cannot thank Governor Edwards and his team enough for inviting us and encouraging us to partner with the Convention Center and ResCon for the 2020 ResCon conference. You know, I think NGA is always blessed with our convening power. That's one of our strongest levers of power. And convening governors, convening governor staff, convening state and local and federal officials and our private sector partners and all kinds of stakeholders. So, and I think the Cybersecurity Summit that you referenced is a wonderful example of our convening power to get every state to attend, and 400 attendees. So, and I think our other valuable asset is just the opportunity that those convenings give us to allow public officials, private sector partners, and other stakeholders to really learn from each other, to share best practices and words of wisdom from their experiences, good experiences and challenging experiences. So we couldn't be more pleased to partner with ResCon because it will do just that. It will provide our nation's governors with that opportunity to learn from each other. And we're just really looking forward to a productive partnership. We can't wait for next year.
Thank you, Nick.
you. And, here at the New Orleans Convention Center, we're very honored to be able to host many events each year that about 1 million people a year come to New Orleans through this building for any number of different important topics that they're discussed, but none more important than what's going to be discussed at ResCon. We're really thankful to be able to partner with with the National Governors Association. They really will reinvent this and relaunch it in a most important way. So we're excited about that opportunity to be your host, and no more prestigious group than this will begin in next year's convention here at the Convention Center in New Orleans. So we're excited, and thank you. Thank you, Governor, for your leadership on this initiative, and we're looking forward to being your host.
Thank you. So thank you, Nikki and Michael. We're excited to partner yet again with the National Governors Association and the Convention Center. And now to show you how serious ResCon is about bringing together the very best, the leaders in resiliency and emergency management space, we've assembled a group of experts today to join us for a short discussion on resiliency that I will actually have the honor of moderating. You'll note among our panelists that we have 3 former FEMA directors from 3 former presidential administrations who are with us. This is an indication of the caliber of participants we expect to see at ResCon next year and each year for a very long time to come. Our panelists today are Nikki Gilliford from the National Governors Association. And Nikki, you can go ahead and have a seat. James Lee Witt, the former FEMA Administrator under President Bill Clinton. Thank you very much for being here. Craig Fugate, who was FEMA Administrator under President Barack Obama. We also have Brian Bond, who is the Vice President of External Affairs for Southwestern Electric Power Company, SWEPCO. Thank you very much, Brian, for being here. And last, and certainly not least, Brock Long, who was FEMA Administrator under President Trump. So again, thank all of you for being here today, and we're going to start. I'll have a question for each of you, and we're going to go down the line. I'm going to start with Nikki, and I guess the first question is, why was the NGA interested in partnering with the Morial Convention Center here in New Orleans to put on the ResCon conference?
Well, thank you, Governor. We've had a long history at NGA of, and we continue to provide support to governors and their senior advisors on resilience, on emergency management, on disaster recovery and infrastructure. In fact, my team advised me last year, I did not know this, but 40 years ago, recognizing a lack of national policy on emergency management, governors work through NGA to advocate for the creation of FEMA. So I learned that last year, so that's part of our history. Something that's near and dear to my heart, for the past 40 years, NGA has hosted the Seminar for New Governors. That conference really provides veteran governors the opportunity to welcome in governors-elect and provide their wisdom and lessons learned about executive leadership and governing. And post-Katrina, NGA realized at the prompting of some of our veteran governors that there was a growing importance to do emergency preparedness training at the Seminar for New Governors. So now we do 4 hours of training for governors a couple weeks after they're elected. And you've served as faculty for that training, and so has Administrator Long and Administrator Fugate, and so we always get a lot of positive response for that, because as you know, day one can hit and a disaster can face a new governor. And then 10 years ago, President Obama established the Council of Governors. The council really provides governors with a structure and a forum for exchanging views and information and advice with our federal officials regarding catastrophic incident recovery and response. So those are some of the large convenings that we do to help governors around this topic. I would also say of late, at our national meetings and at some of our regional meetings, we have specifically talked about resilience but we know we have to dig deeper, and evidence from our roundtable just before this, we need to dig deeper. So we know governors are really interested in identifying how government, the private sector, and community partners can really establish lasting partnerships and spearhead initiatives and strengthen our communities prior to a disaster occurring. So we think ResCon 2020 will really give governors that opportunity to highlight the disasters they prepared for, that they're recovering from, that they're responding to. And we think all the 50 governors, including you, Governor, will have that forum to really discuss in a very real way the best practices and ways, and you can all benefit from each other. So, of course, we're always happy to partner with Louisiana, too. So it was really a no-brainer for us. I think it will be such a benefit to our governors who are just trying to be there for their citizens. And so it was a no-brainer.
Thank you, Nikki.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, it's not always the most senior governors who go to the new governor's training on disaster management. Craig Fugate and I had so many interactions in 2016 in my first year that he recommended that I go in November of that year, which I was very happy to do.
Yeah, we thank him for that. I think he's the one that got you there.
That's right.
Thank you.
The next question is for James Lee Witt. And, obviously, you're the most senior person on the panel.
Thank you.
And you've been doing this a long time. And so you've seen preparation, response, recovery, I think, change over the years. And I guess I would just ask, how has emergency management changed over the time that you've been working in this field? And do we do a good enough job in sharing the knowledge that we develop from one disaster to the next, and not just memorializing within a state, but across the country, those best practices and those lessons learned?
When I was director of FEMA, I got very concerned about the fact that we did not have an institution like a college, university, that was a college degree program for emergency management. So I contacted my university across the river from my hometown. And so we worked with them, and we literally set up a college degree program in emergency management there. It was one of the first ones. And now we just had our conference just last year there. And now they have a master's degree program and a PhD program. Because what I had seen over the years from a local county judge to director of emergency management in Arkansas, and then director of FEMA, that a lot of your local emergency managers at city county level are appointed based on political reasons, that they were appointed to because they got a lot of votes. Sure. And you at one point you saw a lot of that happen from the governor's on down as well. But in today you see more people are appointed because their capability and their expertise. But we still have a problem in emergency management today, particularly in some states and local governments. Louisiana has a great program because you've had a lot of experience. You know what to do, and you have staff that's great to work with. But a lot of locals, give an example, in Arkansas, 75 counties, you have one emergency manager in that county without any staff. And this happens in a lot of areas, that are smaller. And then in the sense, in today's world, a lot of the local governments and so forth don't put a lot of money in emergency management because if they get hit by a big disaster, they know FEMA's going to come in. So, I think the governors have really taken the mantle a little bit further because they know that they need experience there, and they know that they have to have a good team because that failure might lose them election as well. Mm-hmm. And so, but with the events that we're facing today that are more frequent, more devastating, I think it's important that, particularly the highest risk states, that we have a competent emergency management program that knows how to deal with it, knows what these programs are. And we talked a little bit about educating, And I think that we ought to reinstitute the CERT program, which is the Certified Emergency Response Team Member program that was started in California in the fire department, where I know in Florida we did this, where the fire departments trained the neighborhood, high school kids and other people, and gave them CERT T-shirts, but that way it helps get it at the community base and brings it up. I think that would help a great deal.
Thank you very much, and I think those are all excellent points. And just like we need to hire professional economic development folks to lead economic development, we need professional emergency management folks who lead those efforts. Craig Fugate, I know that when you were FEMA administrator, you preached the whole of community approach. And I just ask you to explain that philosophy and how it relates to resilience.
I never came up with whole community. My staff got tired of me talking about all these pieces. I said, first of all, FEMA's not the team, we're part of a team. Yeah. And in Washington, that was an important thing to say, because I think they were so concerned that they had to solve all the problems. And I said, no, you're part of a team. But that team's not just government. I think the bigger the disaster, the more we have to get away from this idea of what I call government-centric problem solving. You have to engage the community. You have to engage the businesses. You have to make sure that all of the NGOs are traditional players like American Red Cross Salvation Army. But we see a lot of groups that emerge during disasters with capabilities. And there's a tendency, well, you're not trained, you're not part of the team, and we turn you away. And if you got the luxury of turning people away in a disaster, it ain't that bad. So this idea they came up with to describe this was this idea of whole of community. How do we engage the community? Not just when there's a disaster, but engaging them early in the planning and preparedness. But also recognizing a lot of the solutions in a disaster are not going to come from government. So like for industry, a lot of times I found we were in the way. We had to ask a different question. Instead of asking what you can do for us, what can we do for you to get you open? How do we support your operations? We know that the quicker power gets turned back on, for a lot of these disasters, the quicker our disaster scales back down to a much smaller number. But in too many cases, we weren't doing that. And so the idea of the whole community was get away from this idea that government-centric problem solving is going to work in big disasters. It wasn't. We had to engage the community in a way that gave them a seat at the table. And that's where the whole community came from, the recognition that disasters are going to require the community. And again, Governor, you've seen it time and time again, the fastest response in every disaster I've ever seen is neighbor helping neighbor. Yeah. Yet we undervalue that. And we need to put that back front and center.
So you're exactly right. It isn't just FEMA, but at the state level, we know that it's churches, it's private industry, it's the non-governmental organizations that can respond the fastest. First of all, they're already in the communities that are being impacted. They're not staged somewhere else. Secondly, they don't have the bureaucracy to tend to when it comes to spending resources. And so they move very quickly, and developing that teamwork approach, I think, is critically important. And Brian, from SWEPCO, we know delivers electricity to more than 500,000 customers in Louisiana, Arkansas, and Texas. And I know that all three of these states, just like Louisiana, have the other two, Arkansas and Texas, they've had more than their fair share of disasters too, and that's impacted your ability to deliver services. So I know that resiliency is important to you, and I would just ask you to discuss that a little bit, along with the importance and the role of public-private partnerships.
Thank you, Governor. I'd be glad to. I'll tell you, our number one job during these storms is to get the power back on and to do it safely. And I'm here today representing really the electric utility industry. I believe that we've made a lot of progress compared to the way we used to respond to natural disasters. A lot of that is a result of mutual assistance programs that we have through Edison Electric Institute. It's invaluable, I'll tell you, when you're sitting there and you have half your customers off, and there's no way that you with your own crews would even scratch the surface on restoring the power. And so the ability to get resources, work with our local governments and state governments to get our resources across the state lines and do it in a timely fashion, that's absolutely critical for us to be able to respond and do it in a way that helps the community, because without the electricity, nothing else is going to go very well. So very proud of what we've accomplished. One thing that we have done in recent years in response to the storm up in the Northeast. We realized that we weren't communicating as well as we should with governmental officials on the local emergency response side of things. So our industry instituted and implemented the incident command system so that now when we're deployed and we go to Florida with our crews, they're speaking the same language when they're working with the emergency response agencies, and that's gone a long way to help improve the situation. I will say too that one of the things that our crew, when the crews come back and they go all over, they went to Puerto Rico, and when you hear the stories of our men and women that go over there and that they're serving alongside the others, it's just impressive the how they work together, the camaraderie that forms. And when they come back and tell their stories, there's always a funny story. And the one that comes to mind that I heard the other day was one of our supervisors went over there and they got tired of eating the food that they were serving in Puerto Rico. And they said it was good, but after about 10 days, it got a little old. So they decided to up the urgency of getting the Wendy's zone. And so they were able to get Wendy's on, and they all enjoyed a good hamburger. So when you hear stories like that, our crews got left out in a Walmart parking lot in Florida during one of the recent storms. They all had to sleep outside on the pavement. About 4 in the morning, the sprinkler systems cut on and woke them all up. So when you think of the sacrifices that they make, along with everyone else, I'm just really proud to be in our industry and to do what we're able to do.
And I know you all are doing a much better job of maintaining, for example, your transmission lines and the vegetation around them to decrease the frequency that you're going to have outages. And a lot of times people think of electricity as just relating to comfort. And air conditioning is important in the summer. But as governor, we're able to depopulate shelters based on whether or not there's electricity restored in the communities that they need to return to, or whether a nursing home or a hospital. But we actually have people on breathing machines scattered throughout our community. So it's literally a matter of life and death, dialysis centers. And so electricity is about a lot more than just comfort, although comfort's important too.
Absolutely.
And we appreciate what y'all do.
Thank you.
And Brock, I think it's the understatement of the day to say that 2017 was a challenging year. And nobody knows that better than you, with 2 major hurricanes impacting the U.S. What did you see in the communities that may have been missing as far as preparedness that could have lessened the impact of those storms? And if you had to distill it down into just a couple of really major lessons learned, what would they be, and how can we do a better job of sharing that information so that going forward we're all more prepared for storms such as hit us in 2017?
So, Governor, first of all, thank you for inviting us here and being proactive and bringing up the topic of resilience, because we got a long way to go in this country. And you know, in 2017 and 18, while I was in office, FEMA dealt with over 220 different declared disasters. A lot of that was wildfires, but then not only were we seeing a larger number of disasters that are occurring, but the magnitude was also just massive and unprecedented. A lot was learned, but I can tell you that a bigger FEMA is not the answer, and that it goes back to the partnership that that Craig and James Lee were talking about earlier. And I equate proper emergency management, or let's say proper resilience, as the chair you're sitting in. That seat is the community. It's supported by 4 legs, and those 4 legs support different things, or represent different things. One is a true culture of preparedness within our citizenry. The second leg is a strong state and local government that is fiscally resilient, has budget stability through maybe reinsurance concepts, has strong emergency management. Maybe they implement strong building codes and land use planning to reduce the impacts of future disasters or climate change. The third leg is meaningfully incorporating the private sector, as we've discussed. FEMA and the government doesn't own a lot of the infrastructure that we depend on, but yet when it breaks, we have to work very closely with them and understand how do we get things such as our communications backbone back up and running that's owned by the private sector, or our power infrastructure and the fuel infrastructure, grocery store suppliers, different things. We have to bring them into the forefront of our planning efforts and not just bring them in a reactive phase and trying to restore it. The fourth leg is the firepower of the federal government. And what we learned is that the proper model of being able to respond and recover from these disasters is one where the efforts are locally executed, state managed by a strong governor, and then federally supported by the federal government, and not the other way around. Anytime FEMA finds itself as 911, then it's never going to go well. And that's what we learned. And so, going forward, I think what we have to do is, one, define what resilience is. Me personally, I believe that communities need to identify clearly what are the indispensable services that have to be operating in their community. And if they're not, then lives are in danger or life routine is in jeopardy. And we want to make sure that they never fail and go down. So how can we use a conference like this, or how do we build unity of effort around all of the resilience efforts to make sure that the indispensable services in a community continue to work, and that we reduce their likelihood of being impacted by future events?
Well, thank you. And thank all of you for coming here today to help us make this announcement about the NGA and ResCon and here at the Ernest N. Morial Convention Center. But more than just an announcement, your presence here makes this a very credible undertaking because it's never been more important than it is right now. Not just in terms of the dollars spent on trying to prepare for, respond to, and recover from disasters, which are at an all-time high, but the frequency of the responses and the varied nature of the disasters. And we've been focusing primarily here today on natural disasters, but cyber attacks are growing in number and intensity as well. And that's something that we're going to have to come to terms with. So we look forward to seeing you next year at this exciting conference. And I think this conference really is going to allow our country to be in a better posture going forward as we learn from one another. And as a West Point graduate, they teach you the principles of war, but not necessarily the exact lessons learned in the last war, because the next one's always going to be different. And so the ResCon can teach the principles of emergency management. But if we only prepare for the last one, the last flood, the last hurricane, the last wildfire, the last tornado, we're not going to be as prepared as we need to be. We need to think about what's coming next. An example of that is when Hurricane Barry hit last month here in Louisiana. That was the first time in history we ever had a hurricane make landfall while the Mississippi River was at flood stage. And it posed an entirely new threat, a new risk that wasn't contemplated either by the Corps of Engineers or the state of Louisiana or any of the local governments along the Mississippi River. So that's just one small example. But thank you all for being here. We really appreciate your presence. And on behalf of the state of Louisiana, I want to thank all of you for your tremendous public service to the country. And all of you have had to spend time in Louisiana because of our disaster. So God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you.